When I was a little girl, my Aunt Lydia scared me. She was my mom's older sister, a reclusive artist who lived alone in a decaying mansion on the edge of town. As a kid, I dreaded our occasional visits to Aunt Lydia's home, with its creaking floorboards, dusty furniture, and strange paintings that covered every inch of the walls. But now that I'm grown, what I feel is not fear, but fascination. You see, a month ago, Aunt Lydia passed away unexpectedly. And in her will, she left the mansion to me. The day after I got the call from the lawyer, I drove out to that decaying old house. As I gazed up at its peeling paint and turreted roof, I realized I hadn't been here in over a decade. I took a deep breath and walked up the overgrown path to the front door, which whined on its hinges as I pushed it open. Everything was just as I remembered. The Victorian furniture covered in white sheets, the Tiffany lamps casting fractured rainbows across the walls. And everywhere, Aunt Lydia's bizarre paintings stared back at me. Landscapes of dark forests under violet skies, portraits of stern noblemen with sharp cheekbones and arched eyebrows. Though I was 16 now and braver, I still hurried through the rooms, avoiding the gaze of those disconcerting paintings. I spent that first day sorting through Aunt Lydia's possessions, deciding what to keep and what to give away. By late afternoon, I felt restless and decided to explore the mansion attic, which I was never allowed to enter as a child. I climbed the narrow stairs, coughing as I emerged into the dust-choked attic. It was crammed with canvases, antique furniture, and other long-forgotten possessions. I was about to descend back down the stairs when a painting propped against the far wall caught my eye. I weaved my way over and gazed down at the portrait of a beautiful dark-haired young woman, her pale skin luminous against a black background. The name Elizabeth was engraved on a plaque at the bottom of the ornate golden frame. Something about the painting captivated me. The woman's expression was neutral, yet there was a sadness in her eyes that felt oddly familiar. I decided on the spot to keep the portrait and hauled it downstairs to hang in my bedroom. That first night in the mansion, I was awoken by creaking floorboards. I lay frozen in the darkness, listening intently until the sound ceased and I eventually fell back asleep. In the morning, everything seemed normal, so I pushed the incident from my mind. Probably just the noises of an old house settling. A few nights later, however, I was again awoken by loud thumping. This time, I leapt out of bed and rushed into the hallway, flipping on lights. But nothing was amiss. I checked every room but found no source for the phantom noises. Yet I could still hear heavy footsteps descending the staircase, fading away as they reached the first floor. I told myself it was all in my imagination. But as the days passed, I continued hearing things at night: footsteps, knocking, distant voices. Friends suggested I was just rattled living alone in the isolated mansion. But I couldn't shake the feeling that the noises started the night I hung Elizabeth's portrait. One evening after a particularly loud and restless night, I examined the painting closely. Something about Elizabeth's expression seemed different than before. I could have sworn her eyes were now narrowed slightly, her mouth turned down at the corners in a judgmental frown. I decided my mind was playing tricks on me and left the portrait alone. But over the following weeks, the changes continued. Elizabeth's posture grew rigid, her scornful gaze seeming to follow me around the room. The beautiful young woman now appeared angry, as if insulted by my presence. One evening I snapped. I tore the painting off the wall and shoved it away in a closet, determined to be rid of Elizabeth's hateful glare. That night, I slept peacefully for the first time. But the next morning when I took the painting out, Elizabeth looked different again. She stared up at me with despondent, pleading eyes, her shoulders slumped in despair. Horrified, I dropped the portrait and backed away, my hands shaking. Somehow, when I wasn't looking, Elizabeth's expression transformed, her eyes and mouth subtly shifting to take on varied human emotions. I knew it wasn't possible. Paintings did not magically change on their own. Yet I could not deny what I was seeing. Over the next few days, I tried everything to test my delusions. I took photos of the portrait, which looked normal when developed. I even set up a video camera overnight, only to find Elizabeth frozen in place each time I checked the footage. But always, whenever I viewed the painting directly, Elizabeth looked slightly different than before, her expression evolving from one emotion to the next: disdain, sadness, fear, anger. As the weeks passed, I became consumed with studying the portrait, admiring the way Elizabeth's countenance seemed to shift so effortlessly. I hung the painting across from my bed so it would be the last thing I saw before I slept and the first upon awakening. Soon, Elizabeth felt less like a painted image and more akin to a living guest in the mansion, a companion to converse with. I spent hours gazing into her eyes, interpreting every nuanced expression that crossed her face. I researched Elizabeth's period dress in the painting, imagining what her life might have been like centuries ago. At night, the phantom noises continued, but they no longer frightened me. I imagined they were just Elizabeth moving about the mansion she used to inhabit. The never-ending supply of wine bottles I always found emptied in the mornings must be Elizabeth simply helping herself to some well-deserved refreshment. My breaking point came late one evening when I awoke to find Elizabeth frowning sternly at me once more. In my nightgown, I ran to the portrait and fell to my knees begging her forgiveness, clawing at the canvas as if I could climb inside and console her. I realized in the morning I must have scratched the painting in my hysterics, as there were shreds of canvas lodged under my ragged fingernails. As I now sit locked away in this facility, I still catch glimpses of Elizabeth's face, constantly changing in my wavering vision. I hope that they allow me art supplies here. I wish to recreate Elizabeth's image exactly as I remember it. She is waiting for me, I know. My dear friend wishes to continue our conversations. I must recreate her portrait perfectly before she becomes angry with me once more. The doctors say I am mad, but they do not understand. One day, I will make them see Elizabeth's beauty too. We will all be together, Elizabeth shepherding us like a watchful mother. We will finally be home.